The boot connected with his ribs before he even hit the ground. 322 Navy SEALs watched in dead silence as Ethan Cole, a security guard, a nobody, a single dad in a gray uniform, crumpled to the concrete floor of the training arena. Marcus Hale stood over him, smirking. Brandon Riker cracked his knuckles. They thought it was over. It wasn't even close to over. What happened in the next 4 seconds left 2 elite operators screaming on the ground and changed every man in that room forever. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. The morning Ethan Cole's life changed forever started the same way every other morning did, with his daughter Lily asking him if he'd remembered to pack her lunch. "Dad!" She was standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, one sock on, one sock in her hand. 8 years old, and already had the look down. The exact look her mother used to give him. The one that said, "You're doing too much and forgetting everything that matters." "Turkey and Swiss," Ethan said without looking up from the coffee maker. "Apple slices, not the whole apple because you never eat the whole apple. Juice box, not water because apparently water's for people who don't love you." Lily uncrossed her arms. "Did you cut the crusts off?" "I did not cut the crusts off." "Dad." "Lily." She huffed, but she smiled. That smile, wide and lopsided, and missing one tooth on the bottom left. That smile was the reason Ethan got up every single morning. That smile was the reason he'd taken the security job at Naval Special Warfare Command 3 years ago, when better offers had dried up, and pride had to take a back seat to rent. That smile was the reason he didn't complain. Not once. Not out loud, anyway. He handed her the lunch bag. She kissed him on the cheek and bolted for the door. "Bus comes in 4 minutes," he called after her. I know." "Lily." She stopped. "Have a good day, kid." She turned and gave him the look again, but softer this time. "You too, Dad." Then she was gone, and the house went quiet. And Ethan Cole stood alone in his kitchen, in his gray security uniform, drank his coffee, and prepared himself for another invisible day. Coronado, California, sat right on the edge of the Pacific, like it was daring the ocean to try something. The Naval Amphibious Base was the kind of place where men walked differently, chest forward, jaw set, eyes that had seen things they didn't talk about at dinner tables. Ethan had worked there long enough to know the rhythms of the base. He knew which SEALs arrived early and which ones arrived loud. He knew which instructors pushed their men to the edge and which ones pushed them over it, just to see what was left. He knew the smell of salt and sweat and gunpowder that clung to everything. And he'd made peace with the fact that he moved through all of it like a ghost. He checked IDs at the gate. He walked perimeters. He wrote incident reports in handwriting his supervisors once described as surprisingly neat for a guy who looks like he fixes motorcycles on weekends. He did his job. He did it well. He went home. He made dinner. He helped Lily with her homework. He went to bed. He woke up, and he did it again. Simple, clean, safe. He'd chosen safe for a reason. It was Warrant Officer Dennis Pruitt who found him. Pruitt was the kind of man who moved through the base quietly and noticed everything. He ran advanced training curricula for the teams, not the physical stuff, the tactical stuff, the edge cases, the ugly scenarios that happened in the middle of firefights that nobody ever wanted to talk about in polite company. How do you treat a sucking chest wound when someone's actively trying to kill you? How do you splint a fracture and still keep moving? How do you defend yourself, hands, elbows, improvised weapons, when you're kneeling over a man who's bleeding out and the threat is 10 feet away and closing. Those scenarios. Pruitt's scenarios. He'd been looking for a demonstrator for a joint medical and combatives training block scheduled for Thursday morning. Someone who understood trauma medicine and could also handle themselves physically in a controlled drill environment. He'd gone through the names he knew. They were either deployed, unavailable, or they'd gotten too comfortable on the circuit, the kind of guys who demonstrated techniques they hadn't actually used in years. And it showed. His chief petty officer had suggested Ethan's name almost as a joke. "The security guy?" Pruitt had said. "The security guy," his chief had confirmed. "Before he was a security guard, sir, he was a special operations combat medic. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Multiple CAS operations. I served with a guy who served with him. Word is, Cole was the real article." Pruitt had done his homework after that. What he found made him put down his coffee and sit very still for a moment. Ethan Cole, age 42, former 18D, Special Forces Medical Sergeant. Attached to ODA 583 out of Fort Carson. 2 deployments, 14 months downrange total. Multiple commendations. 1 Silver Star. The citation was 3 paragraphs long, and Pruitt had read every word twice. Then, medical separation. A blast injury to the left knee. Nothing that took the leg, but enough to take the career. Then, 3 years of physical therapy. A failed attempt at civilian EMT work. A custody arrangement after his wife walked out. And eventually, a security badge and a gray uniform, and a gate at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. Pruitt had driven to the gate himself. Ethan had seen the warrant officer coming from 50 yards out and filed it under unusual but not alarming. Officers didn't usually approach the gate directly unless there was a problem, and Pruitt didn't look like a man with a problem. He looked like a man on an errand. "Cole?" Pruitt said. "Yes, sir." "You got a few minutes?" Ethan glanced at the gate log. "I've got about 4, sir. Shift change in 5. Pruitt almost smiled. "Fair enough. I'll be quick." He pulled a folded paper from his breast pocket, a training schedule, Ethan could see the header, and handed it over. "I'm running a combatives and medical integration block Thursday morning. Main arena, 0700. I want you to be the primary demonstrator." Ethan looked at the paper. He didn't say anything for a long moment. "With respect, sir," he said finally, "I'm a security guard." "You're a former 18D with a Silver Star and hands-on CIB experience in close quarters medical response," Pruitt said evenly. "You're also currently employed on this installation, which makes the paperwork easier. So what I'm asking, Cole, is whether you still know how to do the job, and whether you're willing to do it in front of an audience." Ethan folded the paper carefully. He thought about Lily. He thought about the kitchen that morning. He thought about how long it had been since anyone had looked at him and seen anything other than the badge on his chest. "How big an audience?" he asked. 322 operators, Pruitt said, plus instructional staff. Ethan handed the paper back. Pruitt didn't take it. "Think about it," he said. "You've got until tomorrow morning." He thought about it for exactly 1 hour and 40 minutes, which was how long it took him to drive home, make dinner, help Lily finish a book report on Charlotte's Web, and sit down on the couch with the house quiet around him. Then he called Pruitt and said yes. Wednesday night, he went through his old kit bag. It had been in the back of the hall closet for 3 years, under a broken step stool and a box of Lily's old coloring books. He unzipped it, and the smell hit him first. That specific combination of nylon and old gear, and something underneath that had no polite name, just memory. He inventoried what was inside out of habit. Trauma shears, tourniquet still sealed, field dressing, His old 18D manual, worn at the spine. He pulled out the manual and sat on the floor with his back against the wall. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. He knew every page. He sat there in the hallway with the bag open in front of him and the house dark and quiet. And for a long time, he just breathed. Let the muscle memory come back up from wherever it had been sleeping. Felt the way his hands wanted to move. The routes they knew, the angles they understood. The geometry of threat response that never really left a man once it got into him deep enough. "You crossed a line coming after a medic," his team sergeant used to say. "A medic under fire doesn't fight to win. He fights to survive long enough to finish his job." That is a different and considerably more dangerous animal. Ethan put the manual back in the bag. He zipped it closed. He went to bed. Thursday morning, the arena smelled like fresh rubber matting and sweat that hadn't happened yet. Ethan arrived at 06:45. He was in his civilian clothes, clean jeans, a plain gray long-sleeve shirt, his old working boots. He carried nothing. Pruitt met him at the door and walked him through the setup quickly. The mat space in the center, the medical simulation station to the left, the bleacher seating that ringed the floor. 2 medical mannequins already staged. Tourniquet stations. Pruitt ran through the drill sequence. Ethan would demonstrate 3 defensive scenarios while maintaining simulated treatment on a casualty, explaining his decision-making out loud for the audience. Standard integration block. 60 minutes total. "Any questions?" Pruitt asked. "No, sir." "They're going to look at you," Pruitt said quietly. He wasn't warning Ethan. He was telling him something true. "They're going to see the clothes and the age, and they're going to make a judgment before you open your mouth. That's what they do." "I know," Ethan said. "Doesn't bother you?" Ethan looked out at the empty arena. He thought about the gate, the gray uniform, the badge. 3 years of invisible. "Not especially," he said. By 700, the bleachers were full. 322 men, operators, support personnel, instructional cadre, spread out across the tiered seating with the low rumble of a crowd that was not yet engaged. Coffee cups, arms crossed, phones put away per standing order. The kind of audience that had seen everything and was prepared to be bored. Ethan stood in the center of the mat and felt every single pair of eyes land on him, and then move slightly past him, the way eyes do when they've already decided something isn't worth focusing on. He was used to it. Chief Instructor Harmon stood at the edge of the mat and introduced the block in about 40 words. What it was, why it mattered, who was presenting. When Harmon said Ethan's name and his background, there was a brief shift in the room. Not respect, more like recalibration. Okay, maybe not nothing. But then Harmon said, "Currently serving as facility security personnel," and the room settled back into its original judgment. A voice from the bleachers, low, carrying, designed to be overheard. "They got the gate guard to teach us combatives?" Quiet laughter. Not everyone. Maybe 30% of the room. But enough. Ethan didn't look for the voice. He just began. The first scenario was clean. He talked through it as he moved, treating a simulated femoral bleed on the mannequin while explaining how to read the environment, how to position your body to keep the patient shielded, how to use peripheral vision when your hands were occupied with direct pressure. He demonstrated the defensive pivot, the move you use when a threat comes in from your left while your right hand is inside a wound. And he did it at about 60% speed so the room could track it. The room was quiet. Not impressed, but quiet. He heard Marcus Hale before he saw him clearly. Hale was in the second row of the bleachers, 6'2", built like a door, with a particular kind of stillness that dangerous men sometimes use as camouflage. He'd been watching Ethan with an expression that wasn't quite contempt and wasn't quite curiosity. It was the expression of a man who had decided someone was below him and was now performing the act of watching to confirm that decision. "Question," Hale said. He didn't raise his hand. Pruitt glanced at him, but didn't intercept it. "Go ahead," Ethan said. "You said you pivot left when the threat comes from the left." Hale's tone was conversational, in the specific way a blade is flat until it isn't. "But you're putting your weight on your injured knee doing it. Isn't that a liability?" The room stirred. It was a precise question, precise enough to show that Hale had done his homework on Ethan, or at least gotten a briefing. It was also designed to be a cut. Everyone in the room who knew about the knee injury, and now everyone did, felt it land. Ethan let a beat pass. "You're right," he said. "It is a liability. Most things that keep you alive have a cost." He demonstrated the pivot again, slower. "You manage it by loading the hip instead of the joint. The pain tells you you're doing it wrong. The man staying alive tells you you're doing it right." Silence. Then a voice from higher in the bleachers. Different voice, quieter, less hostile. "Can you show that hip load again?" He showed it again. Brandon Riker showed up beside Hale about 20 minutes into the block. Riker was shorter, but broader through the chest, with the kind of face that had been hit several times and healed without complaint. He'd been standing at the back wall, which Ethan had clocked from the beginning. Men who stand at the back wall during demonstrations are either the most experienced in the room or the most threatened by what they're watching. Sometimes both. Riker moved down to the second row and said something in Hale's ear. Ethan kept demonstrating. He was in the middle of the third scenario, two-threat response while maintaining airway management, and he was keeping 60% of his attention on the drill and 40% on the room. Old field craft. You always kept 40% of yourself somewhere else. He finished the scenario. Chief Instructor Harmon stepped forward. "We're going to move into the live drill portion. I need 2 volunteers to play threat roles." He looked at the bleachers. "These are controlled engagements. You are guests in this man's demonstration. You follow his cues, and you stop when he stops." Hale stood up. Riker stood up. Harmon looked at them for a moment. Ethan saw Harmon's jaw shift slightly. Not a flinch, just the micro-adjustment of a man who's done the math on something and doesn't love the answer. "Cole," Harmon said, "your call." Every eye in the room went to Ethan. He looked at Hale. He looked at Riker. He took the measure of both men the way he'd been taught to take the measure of a room before he entered it. Fast, complete, unsentimental. "Fine," Ethan said. The drill started clean. Ethan was kneeling over the mannequin, simulated tourniquet application on a leg wound, and Hale came in from the left at 3/4 speed, arms extended in a grab attempt. Ethan deflected, used the momentum, guided Hale past him. Controlled. Textbook. The room murmured in a way that meant, "Okay, he's legitimate." Second rep. Riker came in from the right, while Hale reset. Again, Ethan managed it. He didn't dominate. He didn't showboat. He simply moved through the geometry of it like a man walking a path he knew very well. Then Harmon called for the third rep, and something in the room changed. Ethan felt it before he could name it. The way the air pressure shifts before weather. The way a crowd gets quieter right before it gets very loud. He was back in position over the mannequin, hands occupied, and he heard Hale say something under his breath to Riker. Too low for the room, not too low for Ethan. What Hale said was, "For real this time." The warning lit up every trained nerve Ethan Cole possessed. He had exactly enough time to make a choice. He made it. He kept his hands on the mannequin. Not because he wasn't ready, because he was. Because standing up would have told them something about himself that he refused to give away. Because the whole point of everything he'd ever learned, everything that had kept him and his guys alive, in places where the price of a mistake was measured in blood, was this: you do not reveal your hand until the moment you must play it. Hale's boot connected with his ribs from the left. Hard. Not drill speed, full force. Ethan went down. The room went dead silent. He was on the mat, one hand still touching the mannequin, and the pain was real. A deep, spreading burn across his left side that told him at minimum 2 ribs had taken a serious impact. His vision blurred for exactly 1 second, and then focused with the crystal clarity that adrenaline brings when a man who's been in real violence recognizes real violence happening to him again. He heard Riker moving. He heard the room. He heard 322 men holding their breath. He heard Lily's lopsided laugh from somewhere in the part of his brain that kept the things that mattered. And then Ethan Cole stopped being a security guard. What happened next took less than 4 seconds. Later, the men in that room would try to describe it to people who weren't there. They would use words like fast and surgical and I didn't even fully see it. And they would find that none of those words came close. The thing about real skill, genuine, forged in blood, earned by suffering skill, is that it doesn't look like the movies. It doesn't look dramatic. It barely looks like effort. It looks like inevitability. Ethan came off the mat, not up, but sideways, a lateral roll that moved him out of Riker's incoming path, while simultaneously bringing his right hand into contact with Riker's forward knee. Not a strike, a redirection. Precise pressure, precise angle. The specific application of force that a man learns when he's studied the body the way a combat medic studies the body. Not to hurt it, but to understand exactly what it can and cannot survive. What a knee joint cannot survive is being bent in the direction it was never designed to go. Riker went down with a sound that wasn't a word. Hale, who had not expected any of this, who had expected the security guard to stay on the floor, turned and moved in. He was fast. He was very fast. Ethan gave him full credit for that in the flat, unemotional register of his training. He was not fast enough. Ethan's movement off the Riker contact flowed directly into a drop step that put him inside Hale's reaching arms before Hale could close his grip, and his right forearm came across the outside of Hale's left knee in a controlled downward strike. Not maximum force, just enough. Just enough. Hale went down on top of Riker. Both of them were on the mat. Neither of them was getting up on their own. The room was so quiet, Ethan could hear the ventilation system in the ceiling. He straightened. He breathed. His ribs were telling him things he would deal with later. He looked at the 2 men on the mat, one gasping, one making a low, sustained sound that spoke specifically to the vocabulary of serious pain. And he spoke to them the same way he had spoken through every demonstration that morning. Calm, informative, professional. Femur intact on both of you, he said. Lateral collateral ligament is going to be the issue. You'll both need imaging. He paused. The same technique works under fire while maintaining a casualty. That's the point of the block. He looked up. 322 pairs of eyes. Not a single one was looking past him anymore. Chief Instructor Harmon crossed the mat in 6 steps. He stood in front of Ethan and looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned and looked at the 2 men on the ground. Then he turned back. "Medics," he said, and his voice was completely level. "Get them up. He didn't say anything else to Ethan. He didn't need to. But as he turned away, Ethan saw the slight shift in Harmon's expression. Not admiration, not apology. Something more specific than either. Confirmation. Like a man who had suspected something was true for a long time and had just watched it prove itself. Ethan went back to the mannequin. He restarted the scenario from the beginning. "Third technique," he said to the room. "Airway management under threat. Eyes on me." After a moment that felt like it lasted longer than it did, the room moved. They leaned in. They watched. Every single one of them. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see where this story is reaching. And if you've never seen what happens next, stay with us. Part 2 is coming, and the story is only getting started. The medics moved fast. They always did. It was trained into them the same way everything else was trained into them. The response to crisis becoming reflex. The reflex becoming identity. 2 of them were kneeling over Marcus Hale before the echo of Ethan's last word had fully left the arena. And 2 more were with Brandon Riker, their hands moving with the practiced economy of men who'd seen worse and worked faster. Ethan stood at the mannequin and did not watch them. He kept his eyes on the room instead, on the 322 faces still turned toward him, and he breathed carefully through the pain in his ribs, which was sharpening now the way pain always sharpens when the adrenaline starts its slow retreat. He pressed his left arm slightly against his side, tested it. 2 ribs, maybe 3. Nothing displaced. Nothing that would stop him from finishing the block. He finished the block. He walked through the airway scenario twice, once at demonstration speed, once at real speed, and explained the decision tree out loud the way Pruitt had asked him to. His voice stayed steady. His hands stayed steady. When he moved the way he always moved when it counted, which was without waste and without performance. Just the work. The room watched him the way rooms watch things they haven't figured out yet. When it was over, Pruitt stepped to the center of the mat and dismissed the block with the efficiency of a man who understood that the less said right now, the better. The operators filed out in the quiet order of men who had things to process and were doing it privately, which was the only way most of them knew how to process anything. Ethan began resetting the mannequin. He heard footsteps stop behind him. "Cole." He turned. It was a man he didn't recognize. Mid-40s, lean, the particular posture of someone who'd been officer material since the day he was born and had never quite stopped proving it. He had a visitor's badge clipped to his jacket and eyes that had been doing the same thing Ethan's had been doing all morning. Measuring. "Admiral Reese," the man said, extending his hand. "I was observing the block." Ethan shook the hand. "Sir." That was the most controlled response to a live assault I've seen in a training environment in 20 years of watching training environments, Reese said. He said it the way men say true things, flat, without decoration. "I want to ask you a question, and I'd like an honest answer." "Yes, sir." "Were you angry?" Ethan thought about it for one genuine second. Not performing thoughtfulness, actually checking. "No, sir," he said. Reese studied him. "Hale outweighs you by 40 pounds. He came at you from behind after you were already down." "Yes, sir." "And you weren't angry." "Anger is expensive," Ethan said. "I've never been able to afford it in the field." Reese was quiet for a moment. Then something in his expression shifted. Not warmth exactly, more like recognition. The way one specific kind of man recognizes another. "Get yourself to medical," he said. "Those ribs need imaging." "I'll stop by after I finish cleanup, sir." Reese looked at the mannequin, then back at Ethan. "Leave the cleanup," he said. "That's an order." Ethan left the cleanup. The medical bay was a 10-minute walk across the installation, and Ethan made it in 8, moving the way he'd learned to move when something hurt, not favoring it, not ignoring it, just carrying it. An X-ray confirmed 2 cracked ribs on the left side. The corpsman who read the image, a young petty officer who couldn't have been more than 24, looked at the film and then looked at Ethan with the expression of a man doing arithmetic.
"Sir, these look like impact injury," Ethan said. "Training incident." "Yes, sir, I know. I just mean—" The corpsman paused. "You finished the entire block with these?" The block needed to be finished. The corpsman taped him and gave him a standard-issue analgesic that Ethan pocketed without comment. On the walk back, he called the elementary school, not because he expected anything, just because it was a reflex from the past 3 years. Checking on Lily the way you check a tourniquet. Still there. Still good. The secretary told him Lily had won the class spelling bee that morning on the word perseverance. Ethan stood in the path between the medical bay and the arena and held the phone to his ear and didn't say anything for a moment. "Sir, did you get that?" "I got it," he said. "Thank you." He hung up and kept walking. Word travels fast on a military installation. Faster than orders sometimes, and almost as fast as embarrassment. By noon, every operator on the base had a version of what had happened in the arena that morning. Some versions more accurate than others, some details inflated, some minimized. None of them quite capturing the thing itself. The thing itself was harder to carry in a story than people expected. Ethan heard pieces of it throughout the rest of his shift. Not because anyone said anything to him directly. They didn't, not yet. But because people stopped talking when he approached, and started again after he passed. And that particular pattern of silence and resumption told him everything he needed to know about what was being said. He ran his shift, checked IDs, walked his perimeter, wrote his reports in his neat handwriting. At 1600 hours, Chief Petty Officer Roland Kess fell into step beside him on the east walkway. Kess was a 15-year man, solid and careful, with a gray threaded beard and a way of moving that said he'd survive things by paying attention to details. He'd always been decent to Ethan. Not warm, just decent, which on a base like this was its own kind of respect. "You taping those ribs?" Kess asked, without preamble. "Corpsman handled it this morning," Ethan said. Kess was quiet for a few steps. "Hale's going to be on medical hold for 6 to 8 weeks. Riker's looking at a surgical consult." Ethan said nothing. "Command is treating it as a training incident," Kess said. "The official record's going to reflect that both men exceeded the parameters of a controlled drill." He paused. "There are 322 witnesses who saw exactly what happened, so the record has a strong foundation." "Okay," Ethan said. Kess stopped walking. Ethan stopped with him. "Cole." Kess looked at him straight. "Why'd you stay down?" Ethan looked back. "Sir? After the first hit, you knew Riker was coming. You had the angle to stand up and address it before he closed. You stayed on the mannequin for a full beat after you were already on the ground." He tilted his head slightly. "Why?" Ethan thought about that. It was a real question, and it deserved a real answer. "Because the block was about treating casualties under threat," he said. "If I come up early, I'm reacting to the threat first. Casualty comes second. That's the wrong lesson." Kess stared at him for what felt like a long time. Then he said, "You let him kick you in the ribs to make a teaching point." "I made a risk assessment," Ethan said. "The risk was manageable. 2 cracked ribs. Like I said."
Kess shook his head slowly. It wasn't disapproval. It was something more complicated than that. The look of a man recalibrating something he thought he already understood. He started walking again.
After a few steps, he said, without looking at Ethan, "There's going to be a conversation with Pruitt and the Admiral tomorrow morning. You should probably know that." "I'll be at the gate at 0600, Ethan said. "Be there at 0730, Kess said. "The gate can wait." He didn't tell Lily about the ribs. He made dinner, grilled chicken, rice, the green beans she only ate when she forgot she didn't like green beans. And he sat across from her and listened to the full and detailed account of the spelling bee, which had apparently come down to Lily and a boy named Trevor. And Trevor had choked on the word necessary because he'd used one C and two S's instead of one C and two S's. Lily's pronunciation made the distinction unclear, but her confidence in the result was absolute. "And then I just said it," she said. Perseverance. Perseverance. Easy. "You practiced that one?" "We did it in Mrs. Hartley's class like a month ago. I remembered because she said it means when you keep going even when it's hard." Lily loaded her fork with green beans she hadn't noticed yet. "Like not giving up." "Good word," Ethan said. "Did something happen to you today?" Lily asked. She was looking at the way he was holding himself. She'd always been like that, reading him before he knew he was readable. 8 years old and already had the eyes for it. "Training exercise," he said. "Did you get hurt?" "Little bit." She put down her fork. The green beans went undefended. "How much is a little bit?" "2 ribs." "Dad?" "I'm fine, Lily." "You don't sound fine." "I sound exactly like fine." "You sound like you're trying to sound like fine," she said, which was, unfortunately, accurate. "Do you need to go to the doctor?" Already went. She looked at him with her mother's eyes, that steady, unsentimental assessment that didn't let you hide much. Then she picked up her fork again. "Okay," she said, "but you have to tell me stuff." "I know." "Promise." "I promise." She ate a green bean, didn't notice. "Trevor cried a little bit," she said, and her voice had the specific, awkward quality of a child who felt guilty about winning. "Not like a lot, just a little." "Did you say anything to him?" "I told him necessary is a hard word, and he'd probably get it next time." Ethan looked at his daughter across the dinner table and felt the particular fullness in his chest that had nothing to do with cracked ribs. "That was the right thing to say," he told her. "I know," she said. "I'm good at that stuff." The meeting the next morning was not in Pruitt's office. It was in a conference room in the command building that Ethan had walked past for 3 years without being invited into. The kind of room that had a long table and good chairs, and the particular atmosphere of decisions being made. Admiral Reese was already seated when Ethan arrived, along with Pruitt, Chief Kess, and a woman Ethan didn't recognize, who was introduced as Lieutenant Commander Vasquez, Base JAG. The JAG presence told him this was formal. He sat down and put his hands on the table and waited. Reese spoke first. "Mr. Cole, the incident yesterday has been reviewed by command. The determination is that both Petty Officer Hale and Petty Officer Riker departed from the controlled drill parameters and initiated an unsanctioned physical confrontation. Your response is being classified as a lawful defensive action within the scope of the training environment." He paused. "You are not the subject of any disciplinary proceeding." "Understood, sir," Ethan said. "Good." Reese folded his hands on the table. "Now, I want to talk about something else." Pruitt leaned forward slightly.
He'd been watching Ethan since he walked in, the way a man watches something he's been thinking about for 24 hours.
"We want to expand the medical integration program," Pruitt said, "significantly. What you demonstrated yesterday, the application of real trauma medicine to live defensive scenarios. That's a gap we've been trying to close for 2 years, without finding the right person to close it." He paused. "You're the right person." Ethan looked at him. "I'm a security guard." "You were a security guard," Reese said. "That distinction is currently under revision, if you're willing." Ethan sat with that for a moment. He thought about the gate, the badge, the 3 years of invisible. He thought about the kit bag in the hall closet and the manual he hadn't needed to open. He thought about the morning of the block, the way the room had looked past him until it couldn't anymore. "What exactly are you proposing, sir?" he asked. "A contract position," Pruitt said. "Instructional cadre, attached to the training division. You'd design and run the medical combatives integration curriculum. Build it from scratch. Your methods, your scenarios. We give you the resources and the access. You give us the program." "Same installation?" Ethan asked. "Same installation," Reese confirmed. "We understand your situation. Daughter in school locally. We're not asking you to go anywhere." Ethan nodded slowly. He was running the calculation the way he always ran calculations. Not emotionally, not impulsively, but completely. Every variable he could name. The pay would be better. He knew enough about GS scale equivalents to know that. The work would be, he reached for the right word and found it, real. The kind of real he hadn't done in 3 years. The kind of real that had a cost and a purpose and a shape he understood. But that wasn't the variable that mattered most. "I need to ask something," he said. "Go ahead," Reese said. "When Hale and Riker stood up yesterday, when it was clear what they were going to do, Harmon saw it. You saw it." He looked at Reese steadily. "Nobody stopped it." The room was quiet. "That's correct," Reese said. "Why?" Another beat of silence. Then Reese said, "Because we needed to know what you'd do." Ethan looked at him. "You could have pulled me aside, asked me." "Yes," Reese said. "We could have." He didn't apologize. He didn't qualify it. He just let it sit there, honest and uncomfortable, the way true things sometimes sit. "I won't pretend that was fair to you." "2 cracked ribs," Ethan said. "2 cracked ribs," Reese said. "And a full room of operators who will remember what they saw for the rest of their careers." He paused. "I'm not asking you to call that a fair trade. I'm asking you to consider whether the outcome tells you anything about where you belong." Ethan looked at the table. He thought about Lily saying perseverance in the school gym while a boy named Trevor choked. He thought about his team sergeant's voice, a different and considerably more dangerous animal. He thought about the look on the faces in the bleachers in the last 20 minutes of the block. Not the look from the beginning, not the one that moved past him, but the one that replaced it, the one that didn't look away. He thought about 3 years of a gate and a badge and a gray uniform and invisibility. He thought about all of it. Then he said, "I need to clear the contract terms with a lawyer before I sign anything." Vasquez, who had been silent until now, almost smiled. "That's why I'm here," she said. The terms took 4 days to finalize. On the 5th day, Ethan returned his security badge to the administration office and received a new ID. Same installation, different access level, different title on the laminate. The woman at the admin desk, Sandra, who'd processed his ID 3 years ago and who made the best coffee in the building, and who had never once treated Ethan as anything other than exactly what he was, looked at the new title and looked up at him.
Instructional cadre, she said. That's right. Well, she handed him the lanyard. It's about time. He put the ID around his neck and walked out into the California morning, and the base looked the same as it always had. Same buildings, same salt air, same men moving with purpose across the concrete. But the angle was different. The way you see a room differently when you've changed your position in it. His new office was small. One desk, one chair, a whiteboard, and a window that faced west toward the water. Pruitt had given him a standard issue laptop and a blank curriculum template and a start date of Monday. He sat down at the desk and opened the laptop and stared at the blank template for a moment. Then he opened a new document and typed at the top, Medical Combatives Integration, Module 1. He sat there for a while, thinking. Not about the curriculum exactly, but about the shape of the thing, the architecture of it, the way it needed to be built so that the men who learned it would carry it correctly, would understand not just the techniques, but the reasoning underneath them. Why a medic moves the way a medic moves. Why stillness is sometimes the most aggressive response. Why the body you're protecting and the body you're using are never two separate problems. He thought about Marcus Hale on the mat. He thought about that boot in his ribs. He thought about the 4 seconds after it. He thought about what he'd said. You crossed into live response. That was the whole curriculum right there, he realized. That was the architecture. The understanding that there is a threshold, a specific and real threshold, and that once something crosses it, the rules change. Not because you want them to, not out of anger or pride or the need to prove something, but because the situation demands it, and you respond to what the situation demands. You don't cross the threshold first, but you know exactly where it is. He started writing. 2 weeks later, he ran his first official block. Not in the main arena. A smaller training space, 12 operators, a focused group that Pruitt had assembled specifically for the pilot. They came in with the careful neutrality of men who'd heard the story and weren't sure yet what to do with it. They sat in folding chairs and watched him set up the mannequin and the station, and they waited. Ethan looked at them. "My name is Ethan Cole," he said. "I'm going to teach you something today that most of you have never been taught. Not because it's classified or complicated, but because most people who could teach it haven't been in enough situations to know they need to." He paused. "I've been in enough situations." One of the operators, young, maybe 26, with the alert stillness of someone who was very good at his job, said, "What happened to the other 2 guys, Hale and Riker?" "Medical hold," Ethan said. "Both recovering." "Were you trying to break their legs?" "I was trying to stop a threat," Ethan said. "The anatomy did the rest." He looked at the man who'd asked. "That's actually an important distinction. We're going to talk about it today." The young operator nodded slowly. Something in his expression shifted. The same shift Ethan had seen in the bleachers on the last day. The one that meant attention was no longer being performed, but actually given. "Okay," the operator said. "Okay," Ethan said. He began. He called Lily after the block. She was at an after-school program, waiting to be picked up, and she answered on the second ring with the particular urgency of a child who'd been waiting to tell him something. "Dad, I need to tell you something." "Tell me." "Trevor apologized today for something he said last week that I didn't even know was mean until he explained it was mean." "What did he say?" "He said my spelling bee win was lucky because we'd studied that word." She paused. "Which isn't true." "No," Ethan agreed. "It isn't." "And then he apologized, like a real apology. He said he was jealous, and that was wrong, and that I deserved to win." Ethan pulled into the pickup line and looked through the windshield at the school doors, waiting for her to come through them. "How did you feel about that?" "Kind of good?" She sounded uncertain about the kind of, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to feel good about someone else's apology. Is that okay?"
"That's okay," he said. "That's what it feels like when something gets set right."
"Did something like that happen to you today?" she asked.
He thought about the 12 operators in the folding chairs. He thought about the young one who'd asked the real question and listened to the real answer. He thought about his name on the new ID and his curriculum on the laptop, and the blank template that wasn't blank anymore. "Yeah," he said. "Kind of." The school doors opened, and Lily came through them at the specific velocity of a child who has been stationary too long, her backpack bouncing, her face already reading the car line for his car. And when she found it, when her eyes landed on his face in the window, she grinned. That wide, lopsided, bottom tooth missing grin that was the whole reason for everything. Ethan put the car in park and opened the door. "How are the green beans?" she asked as she climbed in. "What green beans?" "The ones from dinner. You made a face." "I didn't make a face."
"You made a face, Dad."
"I like green beans," he said. "You like not green beans." He pulled out of the pickup line and headed home, and Lily talked about Trevor and spelling and something that had happened in PE that she couldn't quite explain, but that had been, in her assessment, deeply unfair, and Ethan listened to all of it. Really listened. The way he'd learned to listen in places where missing something could cost you. And the California afternoon came through the windshield, and the road ran straight ahead of them. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan Cole felt like a man who was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was built to do. The gate was behind him now. What was in front of him was still taking shape. But he'd spent his whole life learning to move forward anyway, into the space before the picture cleared, trusting his hands and his training and the knowledge of where the threshold was. He knew where it was. He'd always known. The curriculum took shape the way good things take shape, not all at once, but in layers, each one resting on the one before it, each one holding the weight of what came next. Ethan worked on it early in the mornings before Lily woke up, at the kitchen table with his second cup of coffee and the laptop open and the house quiet around him. He'd always done his best thinking in that window, the hour before the world made its demands, when his mind was still in the particular clear state that came from sleep and hadn't yet been crowded by the day. He built the modules the way he'd been taught to build anything that mattered. Start with the failure mode. Figure out how things go wrong. Work backward from there to the thing that prevents it. The failure mode in medical combatives was simple and consistent, and almost nobody talked about it directly. A medic who froze. Not from cowardice, that wasn't it, that almost never was it. From priority conflict. From the trained instinct to treat the casualty colliding at full speed, with the survival instinct to address the threat, and the two of them locking up in the space between intention and action, while the situation continued developing on its own timeline with no interest in waiting. He'd seen it. He'd felt the edge of it himself, twice, in places he didn't name out loud anymore. The curriculum was built to solve that collision, not to eliminate it. You couldn't eliminate it, and anyone who told you otherwise was selling something. But to train the pathways so the resolution happened faster, so the choice became reflex, so the hands knew what to do before the conscious mind finished asking the question. 3 weeks into the new position, he had a framework. 6 weeks in, he had a full Module 1. By the time the California winter settled into its version of cold, which was not cold by most measures, but was cold enough for Lily to demand her heavy jacket every morning, with the specific conviction of a child who decided something and was not revisiting the decision. He had the first 4 modules drafted and the 5th one taking shape. Pruitt reviewed them on a Thursday afternoon and sat with them for a long time without speaking. Ethan waited. He'd learned to wait. "This is good," Pruitt said finally. "Thank you, sir." "This is genuinely good, Cole." Pruitt looked up from the pages. "Module 3, The priority sequencing under escalating threat. I've never seen that framed that way before, not in any curriculum I've reviewed. I framed it the way it actually happens, Ethan said. Most curricula frame it the way they want it to happen. Pruitt set the pages down and leaned back. There's going to be pushback, he said. When we roll this out to the full training population, some of the senior operators are going to resist it on principle. They'll see the medical component as a soft add-on to a combatives block, and they'll treat it that way. I know, Ethan said. Does that concern you? No, Ethan said. It concerns me if they don't engage. Resistance means they're paying attention. Pruitt looked at him for a moment, with the expression Ethan had started to recognize. The one that meant Pruitt was updating something, filing new information into a category that was still being built. All right, he said. We'll schedule the full rollout for the first week of February. I'll want you to address the entire training staff beforehand. Set the context. Understood, sir. And Cole, Pruitt paused. I'd recommend being at least marginally diplomatic. Ethan considered that. I'll do my best, sir. Pruitt's mouth did the thing it did when he was suppressing something. That's what I was afraid of, he said. Marcus Hale came back to the base on a Tuesday. Ethan heard about it the way he heard about most things now. Not through official channels, but through the ambient information flow of an installation where everyone knew someone who knew something. Kess told him, walking the east corridor in the direction of the training annex, keeping his voice in the register of a man delivering information without editorial comment. Medical hold ended Friday, Kess said. He's on limited duty. No full training rotations until the surgical team clears him. Okay, Ethan said. He's been talking, Kess said. I figured. Not about you directly. About the program. About whether it belongs in the training pipeline at all. Kess glanced at him sideways. Some of the senior operators are listening. Some of the senior operators are always listening to the wrong thing, Ethan said. That's not new. Kess was quiet for a few steps. He's got friends, Cole. People who respect his operational record. When he says something, it carries. What's he saying specifically? That the block shouldn't be taught by a civilian contractor. That the integration concept is sound, but the delivery is wrong. It needs an active duty operator, someone with current field credentials, not someone who's been out for 3 years working a security post. Ethan walked in silence for a moment. He let the words land where they needed to land, and took the measure of what they did when they got there. Hale wasn't entirely wrong. That was the part that required honesty. The argument had a real shape to it. A man who'd been out of the field for 3 years, teaching current operators about field response, was a legitimate question, not a trivial one. The thing Hale was wrong about was what the answer to that question was. He's going to make his case to Pruitt? Ethan asked. Probably to Reese directly, Kess said. He's got that kind of access. Okay. That's all you've got? Okay? Ethan looked at him. What would you like me to say? Kess stopped walking. He turned to face Ethan squarely, the way he did when he wanted to make sure something was received and not just heard. I'd like you to take it seriously, he said, because Reese listens to people with operational credibility, and Hale has a lot of it. Injuries and behavior aside. I take it seriously, Ethan said. I just don't intend to do anything about it. Why not? Because the curriculum stands on its own, Ethan said. Either it works or it doesn't. If it works, Hale's argument doesn't matter. If it doesn't work, his argument is irrelevant, because the program should be revised anyway. Kess stared at him. That is a remarkably calm position for a man whose job is currently under review. Is it under review? Kess opened his mouth, closed it. Then he said, not officially. Then I'll wait until it officially is, Ethan said, and kept walking. He told Lily about it that night, or most of it.
The version of it that an 8-year-old could hold without it becoming something she carried to school and worried about between subjects. "Someone at work doesn't think I should be there," he said. They were on the couch after dinner, Lily in the specific configuration she adopted for serious conversations, which was sideways, with her feet tucked under her and her full attention aimed at him like a small searchlight. "Why not?" she asked. "He thinks someone else would do the job better." "Would they?" Ethan thought about that honestly. "No," he said, "but I understand why he thinks so." "That's weird," Lily said. "Why is that weird?" "Because if you know you're right, why does it matter that he thinks he's right?" Ethan looked at his daughter. "Because sometimes the person who thinks they're right has more people listening to them than the person who actually is right." Lily considered this with the seriousness she applied to things that seemed unfair. "That's happened in our class," she said finally. "Trevor's friends always listen to him, even when he's wrong." "What do you do about it?" "I just do the thing correctly," she said, like it was obvious. "Because eventually, everyone can see the difference." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "That's pretty much the whole strategy." Lily looked pleased with herself, in the way she looked pleased when she'd accidentally said something wise, and could tell it had landed. She unfolded from the couch. "I'm going to read," she announced. "Lights out by 9. 9:30. 9:15. She weighed this with great theatrical deliberation. "Fine," she said, and disappeared down the hall. The confrontation, when it came, happened in the corridor outside the training annex on a Wednesday morning, and it came not with a kick this time, but with words, which in Ethan's experience were often the harder thing to navigate. He heard his name from behind him and turned. Hale was in civilian clothes. Light duty meant no uniform, and without the uniform he looked different, something slightly reduced, in the way that men who are built for action look reduced when the action is temporarily removed. He was moving with a measured gait that showed the work his knee was still doing. But his posture was the same. The jaw was the same. The eyes were the same. Ethan stopped and waited. "Cole," Hale said. He stopped a few feet away. "We need to talk." "All right," Ethan said. Hale looked at him for a moment, measuring, the way he'd measured him in the bleachers the first day, but with a different quality to it now. Less contempt. Something more complicated had replaced it, and Ethan could feel him working through it in real time. "I've been reading your modules," Hale said. Ethan didn't respond to that. "Pruitt shared them with the senior cadre for feedback," Hale said. "Standard review process." "I know," Ethan said. "That's appropriate." Hale's jaw shifted. "I have issues with Module 3. "What specifically?" "The threshold framework. The concept of the response boundary." Hale crossed his arms, which Ethan read as defensive but not aggressive. A man protecting something he was unsure about, not one preparing to advance. "You're asking operators to make a cognitive decision about whether a threat has crossed a specific threshold before they respond. In a real environment, that delay gets people killed." It was a real objection. Ethan gave it the respect it deserved. "You're describing the straw man version of the framework," Ethan said, "not the framework itself." Hale's eyes sharpened. "Explain that." "The threshold isn't a conscious decision point. It's a trained recognition pattern. The same way you don't think, 'Should I address this target?' You've trained the recognition until the response is ahead of the thought." Ethan held his gaze. The problem most medics have isn't that they make the wrong decision. It's that they haven't trained the recognition to the level where the decision is automatic. The curriculum builds that recognition. Module 3 specifically. Hale was quiet. "You haven't been through the block," Ethan said. "You've read the paper version. The paper version of How to Swim doesn't tell you what it feels like to be in the water." Something moved in Hale's expression that Ethan couldn't immediately name. It was somewhere between resistance and acknowledgement, the two of them occupying the same space in a man who wasn't used to holding both at once. "The day in the arena," Hale said. His voice was different now, lower, stripped of the performance quality it had carried in the bleachers. "You knew what we were going to do." It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered it. "Before you said it." "And you stayed on the mannequin anyway." "Yes." "Why?" Hale asked. And there it was, the real question, the one underneath all the others, the one he'd apparently been carrying for weeks. "You could have addressed it. You had the angle, you had the timing. Instead, you let me—" He stopped. Something in his face tightened. "You let me kick you." "I demonstrated the correct response to a medical combative scenario," Ethan said. "You let me hurt you, to make a point." "I managed a calculated risk to make a teaching point. Yes." Hale stared at him. The calculation going on behind his eyes was visible and complicated and honest. "That's—" He stopped again, started over. "Most men I know would have come up swinging." "I know," Ethan said.
"Doesn't that bother you, that you could have—" "No," Ethan said. Not harshly, just plainly. The block needed to be finished. The lesson needed to be real. A man on a mat who didn't know if the threat was real and still stayed on the casualty. That's the lesson. That's the whole thing. He paused. "You gave me the lesson. I don't hold that against you." The corridor was quiet for a moment. Hale uncrossed his arms. It was a small movement, but Ethan read it accurately. "Your response," Hale said carefully, "after I was down." He was choosing words with unusual precision, like a man disabling something. "That was... Technically, I've never seen anything cleaner. At that speed, with the body angle you were working from, the likelihood of collateral damage to the femur should have been higher," Ethan said. "I know. I was precise." "You were controlling the outcome, not just responding." "Yes." Hale looked at him for a long time. "That takes something I don't have a word for," he said. "It takes practice," Ethan said, "and the right kind of reason." "What's the right kind of reason?" Ethan thought about that. He thought about Lily. He thought about the field. He thought about all the things he'd held in place in moments when holding them in place was the most demanding thing a man could do. "You're not trying to hurt them," he said. "You're trying to finish the job. The response is in service of the job, not the other way around." He paused. "Hale, your objection to the curriculum. Are you going to take it to Reese?" Hale's expression shifted. "I was," he said. "And now?" A long beat. "I want to go through the block first," Hale said. "When my knee clears. I want to go through the full curriculum as a trainee, not an evaluator." Ethan looked at him steadily. "That's a fair request." "Will you let me?" "You don't need my permission. You need Pruitt's clearance and a medical release." Ethan paused. "But yes, I'll take you through it myself." Hale nodded once. It was tight and controlled, the nod of a man who didn't give ground often and was aware of the strangeness of doing it now. He started to turn away. "Hale," Ethan said. Hale turned back. "Two cracked ribs," Ethan said. Not accusatory, just a fact on the table between them. Hale held his gaze. Something moved through his expression that was uncomfortable and unresolved and completely genuine. "I know," he said. "I know what I did." "I'm not asking for anything," Ethan said. "I just wanted to say it. So it's been said." Hale stood there for a moment. Then he said, "When I come through the block, I'll do the full curriculum." "Good," Ethan said. And that was where they left it.
Not resolved exactly, not clean, but real. The kind of real that sometimes mattered more than clean. The February rollout was a different kind of pressure. Not the pressure of the arena, not physical, not immediate. The slower, colder pressure of standing in front of a room of people who had institutional reasons to discount what you were saying, and presenting it to them anyway, completely, without apology. Knowing that some of them were going to find reasons to push back, not because the material was wrong, but because the person delivering it challenged something they'd decided about the world. Ethan had prepared. Not in the way that meant rehearsing. He didn't rehearse, never had. But in the way that meant knowing the material from the inside out, being so familiar with it that it didn't live on note cards or slides, but in his hands, the way it needed to live to be taught correctly. He stood at the front of the instructional staff briefing room on a Monday morning in February. 16 senior training cadre and 3 officers in front of him. And he talked about the curriculum the way he'd always done things. Directly, without theatrical framing, starting with the problem and moving toward the solution. He talked for 40 minutes. When he finished, a Master Chief named Dolan, who'd been watching him with the stillness of a man who'd decided early and wanted to be proven wrong, asked the first question. "What's your current field status?" Dolan asked. "Contractor," Ethan said. "No current deployment rotation." "Last operational deployment?" 14 months downrange, ODA 583. Final deployment ended approximately 3.5 years ago. Dolan's expression acknowledged this without letting anything show. "So you're asking us to adopt a program designed by a man who hasn't been in a live environment in 3 years. I'm asking you to evaluate a program on its merits," Ethan said. "My field status tells you where I developed the foundational knowledge. It doesn't tell you whether the material is effective." "Those aren't separate questions," Dolan said. "They're not entirely the same question either," Ethan said. "A surgeon who stops operating can still teach surgical technique. A pilot who stops flying can still train pilots. The question is whether the knowledge is current and correct, not whether the person presenting it is currently active." Dolan leaned back slightly. "How do we know the knowledge is current?" "Run it," Ethan said. "Put your operators through a controlled evolution using the Module 3 framework. Measure response time, decision accuracy, and casualty outcome under escalating threat conditions. Compare it to baseline." He looked at Dolan directly. "If the numbers don't justify the curriculum, I'll revise it. If they do, we continue. I'm not asking for faith. I'm asking for a controlled test." Silence in the room. Then a lieutenant commander in the third row said, "What's your projected timeline for the full training population?" And the meeting shifted. Not completely. Dolan was still watching him with careful eyes, and 2 of the other senior instructors were still carrying their resistance with the specific posture of men who hadn't finished deciding. But the nature of the room had changed. It was no longer assessing whether Ethan belonged there. It was working with the assumption that he did. That was the threshold, different from the one in the arena, but real in the same way. He drove home that evening in the dark, the California coast invisible behind fog, and he thought about the meeting and the curriculum and Hale in the corridor and the 2 cracked ribs that had mostly stopped announcing themselves when he turned too quickly. He thought about all the distance between the gate and the briefing room, which was not a large physical distance, but was something else entirely. The kind of distance that a man measures not in feet, but in what it cost him to cross it. His phone buzzed on the seat. A text from Lily's after-school program. "She left her jacket again. It's waiting at the front desk." He shook his head and almost smiled. Some thresholds were more complicated than others. He pulled into the pickup line, and Lily came through the school doors without her jacket, in the specific velocity she always had. And she spotted the car and cut toward it at a diagonal that was optimistically designed to suggest she was not cold. She was cold.
She got in and immediately pressed her hands against the heat vents. "Your jacket is at the front desk," Ethan said.
"I know."
Lily.
"I know, Dad. I left it because Emma left hers, and I didn't want her to feel bad."
He looked at her. "That's a kind reason."
"It was also really cold waiting for the bus," she said. "So maybe it was a dumb reason."
"Kindness isn't dumb," he said. "Consequences are just consequences." She pressed her face toward the vent. "How was your day?" "Better than expected," he said. "Did the people listen this time?" He pulled out of the pickup line and into traffic. Outside, the fog was thick and close, and the streetlights were doing their best. "Most of them," he said. "That's progress," Lily said, with the tone of someone who had been monitoring a long-running situation and was cautiously optimistic about recent data points. "Yeah," he said, "it is." She leaned her head against the window. The heat was working now, and she was relaxing into it, the cold letting go, her eyes getting the soft look they got when she was tired and happy at the same time. "Dad," she said. "Yeah?" "Do you like the new job?" He thought about the blank curriculum template from the first day, which wasn't blank anymore. He thought about the 12 operators in the folding chairs and the 16 cadre in the briefing room, and Hale in the corridor uncrossing his arms. He thought about Pruitt reading the modules and going quiet, and Reese in the conference room saying, "I want to ask you a question, and I'd like an honest answer." And his own answer arriving before he'd finished checking it. "No, sir, I wasn't angry." He thought about what it felt like to be in a room where people were leaning in. "Yeah," he said, "I like it." Lily didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Good. You seemed like you were supposed to do something like that." He looked at her. "You have the face," she said. "When something's right, you get this face." "What face?" She did a small imitation of it, a slight forward set to the jaw, eyes focused on something slightly ahead of where they were. It was not an unflattering impression. "I don't look like that," he said. "You look exactly like that," she said. He turned onto their street. The lights of the house were off. He hadn't left any on this morning, which was a thing he occasionally forgot when the morning started early. The house would be cold for about 10 minutes after they got in, until the heat caught up. He'd make dinner. He'd ask about the spelling test she'd mentioned this morning. He'd remind her about the jacket tomorrow, and she'd forget anyway, and he'd make peace with that. Simple. Clean. But not invisible anymore. Never invisible again. The thing about finding where you belong is that it doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It doesn't come with a ceremony, or a formal statement, or a moment of sudden, obvious clarity. It comes the way the heat in a cold house comes, gradually, from the inside out, until one day you realize the chill is gone, and you can't say exactly when it left. Ethan Cole pulled into the driveway and cut the engine, and sat in the quiet for exactly 1 second. Then he got out of the car. He had dinner to make. He had work to finish. He had a daughter who'd left her jacket at school because her friend forgot hers, and tomorrow morning he was going to pack it in her bag himself, and she was going to roll her eyes, and that was going to be exactly right. Everything, in its way, was exactly right. He unlocked the door and went inside, and the house was cold, and then it wasn't. Marcus Hale's medical clearance came through on a Thursday morning in late February, and by Thursday afternoon, he was standing in the doorway of the small training room that Ethan had claimed as his own, the one with the whiteboard and the west-facing window, and the desk that was now buried under printed module drafts, field manuals, and one of Lily's drawings that she'd put in his bag as a surprise, and that he'd unfolded and taped to the wall without thinking too much about it. Hale looked at the drawing. It was a crayon rendering of what was either a man in a uniform or a very confident rectangle. There was a yellow star in the upper corner. "My daughter," Ethan said, without looking up from the module he was marking. "How old?" "8." Hale nodded. He stood in the doorway with the particular discomfort of a large man in a small space, who hadn't decided yet whether he was staying. His knee was visibly better. The gait that had been measured and careful 2 weeks ago in the corridor was closer to normal now. Though Ethan noticed he still loaded his weight slightly differently when he thought no one was watching. "Medical cleared me for full training activity," Hale said. "I know. Pruitt told me." Ethan set down the pen. "You still want to go through the block?" "I said I would." "People say things," Ethan said. "Doesn't always mean they mean them." Hale's jaw tightened slightly. "I mean it." "All right." Ethan closed the module folder. "Monday morning, 0700. Wear something you can move in." He paused. "And come alone, not with Riker." Something moved in Hale's expression. "Riker's still on surgical hold." "I know that too," Ethan said. "I'm telling you anyway." Hale looked at him for a long moment, and in that look was the layered complexity of a man who'd spent weeks recalibrating something he'd been certain about, and was still not entirely finished with the process. He nodded once, started to turn. "Hale," Ethan said. He stopped. "Bring a water bottle. The block runs 90 minutes, and I don't break early." Hale almost said something. Whatever it was, he kept it. He left. Ethan picked up his pen and went back to the module. Monday came in cold and clear, the kind of California morning that didn't apologize for its beauty. And Hale was in the training room at 6:58, water bottle in hand, wearing a plain gray shirt and training pants, and the expression of a man who'd prepared himself for something and was standing at the edge of finding out if the preparation was sufficient. Ethan was already there. He ran Hale through the block the same way he ran everyone through it, completely, without modification or accommodation, starting at the beginning and building through each layer in the order the layers were designed to be built. No shortcuts because of who Hale was. No extra difficulty for the same reason. The first hour was mostly cognitive. Framework, sequencing, decision architecture. Ethan talked and Hale listened. And the quality of Hale's listening was different from what Ethan had seen in the bleachers. No performance, no evaluation posture. Just a man taking in information he'd decided to take seriously. He asked questions twice. Both questions were good ones. Ethan answered them directly and moved on. The second part was physical. "Mannequin goes here," Ethan said, positioning it. "You're treating a femoral bleed. Your hands are occupied. Threat enters from your 9 o'clock at 40%, Hale said. He'd read the module. 40%, Ethan confirmed. "Don't address it yet. Keep treating. Tell me when you feel the threshold." Hale looked at him. "You want me to take a hit to learn the threshold?" "I want you to stay on the casualty until your trained recognition tells you the situation has crossed from manageable to critical. Then I want you to respond." Ethan paused. "I'm not going to hit you with anything you can't handle, but it needs to be real pressure, not a demonstration." Hale considered this. "Same thing you did." "Similar," Ethan said. "Yours will be more controlled, because you're learning it, not demonstrating it." "And if I come up early? Abandon the casualty before the threshold?" "Then we reset and do it again," Ethan said, "until the recognition is built." Hale set his hands on the mannequin. He got into position. He looked forward with the focused stillness of a man committing to something. "Ready," he said. Ethan moved. He came in from the left at 40%. Genuine pressure, genuine angle, but calibrated. Not the kick from the arena. The sustained kind of pressure that a real threat applies when it's testing the space,
probing for response. He watched Hale's body language with the precision of a man who'd spent years reading exactly this kind of information. He watched Hale's hands on the mannequin. He watched the slight tension in Hale's shoulders as the pressure increased and the conflict arrived. Treat the casualty. Address the threat. And he watched Hale fight through it, hold the position, keep his hands where they were. He increased the pressure. Hale's hands stayed on the mannequin. Ethan stepped it up one more level, still controlled, but genuinely close now, inside the margin where a man's survival instincts start sending very loud messages. Hale's hands stayed. And then Hale moved, not up, but lateral. The same directional choice Ethan had made in the arena. The hip-load pivot that redirected rather than abandoned. And his right hand came off the mannequin for exactly the 1 second required to change the geometry of the threat before going back to the wound. Ethan stepped back. The room was quiet. Hale stayed in position for another 3 seconds, still treating, still focused on the mannequin. And then he stood and turned around. His face was something Ethan hadn't seen on it before. Not the contempt from the bleachers. Not the complicated resistance from the corridor. Something rawer than either. The expression of a man who has just felt something in his body that changes what he understands in his mind. "I felt it," Hale said. "The threshold." "I know," Ethan said. "I saw it." "It's not a thought," Hale said. He sounded slightly stunned by this, like a man confirming something he'd suspected but hadn't believed until now. "It's the body knows before the thought forms." "That's the whole curriculum," Ethan said. "That's what we're building." Hale looked at the mannequin, then at Ethan. "I've been in firefights," he said. "I know what threshold feels like in an offensive context. I didn't know." He stopped, started again with more care. "I didn't know it worked the same way while you were treating a casualty. I assumed the cognitive load of the treatment task would delay the recognition." "It does," Ethan said, "until the recognition is trained to run parallel to the treatment task. That's what the module builds. Parallel processing." Hale was quiet for a moment. "How long to train it adequately?" "For someone at your base level? 3 to 4 blocks, with the right spacing between them." Ethan paused. "The first block is usually the hardest, because you're fighting what you already believe about how it should feel. After that, it comes faster." Hale nodded slowly. He picked up his water bottle and drank. He was thinking. Ethan could see it. The real kind of thinking. Not the kind designed to produce a pre-decided conclusion, but the kind that was actually going somewhere new. "I want to go through the remaining blocks," Hale said. "You're welcome to." "And I want—" He paused again. Something was costing him. Ethan waited for it to arrive without helping it along. "I want to retract the recommendation I was going to take to Reese." "Was going to," Ethan noted. "I didn't go," Hale said. "After the corridor. I told Reese I needed more time to evaluate the curriculum before I made a formal recommendation either way." Ethan looked at him steadily. "That was honest." It was also, Hale made a small sound that might have been a reluctant acknowledgement of something. "Kes told me the same thing you said to him, about the curriculum standing on its own. I kept thinking about that." He paused. "I kept thinking about the arena." "The arena is over," Ethan said. "I know, but the lesson isn't." Hale met his eyes. "You stayed on the mannequin. I kicked you in the ribs and you stayed on the mannequin. I've been around a lot of men who could handle pain. I've never been around a man who could choose to take damage in service of a teaching point and stay that precise on the other side of it." His voice was stripped down now, all the performance long gone from it. That changes what I think the curriculum is.
What do you think it is? Ethan asked.
I thought it was a medical block with self-defense add-ons, Hale said. It's not that. It's a course in how to decide what matters when everything is trying to make you forget. Ethan was quiet for a moment. That was the best description of the curriculum he'd heard from anyone, including himself. Write that down, Ethan said. I want to put it in the program overview. Hale looked at him. For a fraction of a second, something moved across his face that was adjacent to surprised, and then it settled into something that wasn't quite a smile, but was in the neighborhood. All right, he said. Brandon Riker came back to light duty in March. His situation was different from Hale's. The surgical consult had confirmed a partial tear, and the repair had gone well, but it required 6 weeks of real recovery time and a physical therapy protocol that he was still 2 weeks from completing. He was on base but constrained, the specific frustration of a physical man limited by his own body, showing in everything from the way he moved to the way he occupied a room. Ethan heard he was back the same way he'd heard about Hale, through Kes, who maintained the role of information conduit with the quiet efficiency of a man who understood that information managed well was a form of leadership. He's not where Hale is, Kes said. This time they were in Ethan's office. Kes in the one extra chair, which he'd claimed with the ease of a man who decided he was welcome without being told. He's still processing. Meaning angry, Ethan said. Meaning he hasn't decided what to do with what happened, Kes said carefully. Hale had the corridor conversation with you. Riker hasn't had a version of that. Does he want one? Kes thought about it. Honestly, I don't know. He's a different kind of man than Hale. Hale is arrogant, but he's honest with himself when the evidence is clear. Riker is... He stopped. Riker measures himself by what he can do physically. This injury has been hard on him in a way that goes beyond the injury. Ethan understood that without needing it explained. He'd had his own version of it. 3 years ago, a knee and a separation and a gait and a gray uniform. He understood exactly what happened to a man who'd built his identity around capability when the capability was interrupted. I'm not going to seek him out, Ethan said. That's not my job. I know, Kes said. But if he comes to me, I think he will, Kes said. Eventually. Ethan looked at the wall with Lily's drawing on it, the rectangle man with the yellow star. He thought about what it had felt like to be on the wrong side of an interruption. Not the injury itself, but the silence after it. The long gray quiet of a life that was functional but not full. The distance between surviving and being where you were supposed to be. Tell him the block is there if he wants it, Ethan said. Same as Hale. No conditions. Kes nodded. He stood, which was his signal that the conversation had accomplished what it needed to. You know, he said, pausing at the door, when I put your name forward to Pruitt, it was mostly because I needed the problem solved, and you were the right solution on paper. I know, Ethan said. I wasn't expecting... Kes gestured, a small economical motion that encompassed the office, the curriculum, the months of everything. This. What were you expecting? Honestly, one good block and a graceful return to the gate. Kes said it without apology. It was just the truth, and he knew Ethan could handle it. I underestimated you. A lot of people did, Ethan said. Yes, Kes said. We did. He left. Ethan picked up his pen and went back to work. The full rollout happened on a Tuesday in the second week of March. The training population was 42 operators in the first wave, not the whole installation, but a significant cohort, enough to generate real data and real feedback. Pruitt had designed the evaluation metrics with Ethan's input, pre-block baseline assessments, in-block performance measures, and a 30-day post-block evaluation that would test retention under scenario conditions. Ethan ran it over 3 days. Day 1 was the cognitive foundation, which he'd learned by now to deliver with a specific combination of precision and accessibility that kept operators engaged without losing the technical depth. Day 2 was the physical integration, the part where the understanding in the mind had to become fluency in the body. Day 3 was full scenario evolution, the closest thing to field conditions they could generate in a training environment. Day 2 was always the hardest. Day 2 was where men found out what they actually believed instead of what they thought they believed. And the gap between those two things could be significant. He'd had operators in the pilot blocks who'd been completely confident through Day 1, and then hit the physical integration like a wall. Not because they lacked ability, but because their bodies had trained reactions that conflicted with what the curriculum was building. Untrained reactions don't argue with you when you're sitting in a chair. They argue with you when the pressure is real and the adrenaline is present, and the mannequin has blood coming out of it, and something is moving toward you, fast. On the second day of the first rollout wave, about 20 minutes into the physical integration, a chief petty officer named Garrett came up off the casualty and turned toward the incoming simulated threat 6 beats too early. He recovered and reset without comment, and Ethan ran him through it again. Same result. Same beat, same early departure from the casualty. After the third time, Ethan stopped the drill. "What are you feeling when you come up?" Ethan asked him. Garrett's jaw was tight. He didn't like this. "Like I need to address the threat." "Before the threshold?" "Before I can tell where the threshold is," Garrett said. He said it with the frustration of a man who'd identified the problem and didn't yet have the fix. "I know it should be later. My body doesn't care what I know." "That's honest," Ethan said. "That's exactly what we're working on." He looked at Garrett directly. "Can I tell you something?" "Go ahead." "The fact that your body is reacting before your training can redirect it doesn't mean your training isn't there. It means the routing isn't built yet. You're trying to override a reflex with a decision. That's too slow. We have to build a reflex to replace the reflex." He paused. "That's what the repetitions do. It's not going to feel right today. It's going to feel right in about 48 hours. Garrett looked at him with the expression of a man who wanted to believe something he wasn't sure he could yet. "You're telling me the thing I'm bad at is going to fix itself in 48 hours. I'm telling you the thing you're training is going to start routing faster in about 48 hours, Ethan said. "You'll still be doing the work. The work is just going to land differently." Garrett set his hands on the mannequin again. "Run it again," he said. Ethan ran it again. The fourth time, Garrett made it 2 beats further before he came up. Then 3. By the end of the day, he was at the threshold with enough consistency that Ethan marked his sheet with a notation that meant progressing correctly and moved to the next station. Garrett caught him after the block. 48 hours, Garrett said. It wasn't a question. "Roughly," Ethan said. "If you're wrong about that, I reserve the right to complain loudly." "That seems fair," Ethan said. On day 3, Garrett stayed on the casualty through the full scenario. Ethan didn't say anything when it happened. He didn't need to. The look on Garrett's face was enough. The specific look of a man whose body has just done something his mind has been trying to teach it, and the gap between instruction and execution suddenly, cleanly closed. That look. That was why the curriculum existed. That was why the 2 cracked ribs had been worth it. Riker found him on a Friday afternoon. Ethan was in the parking area, heading to his car, end of shift, keys in hand. He heard his name and turned, and there was Riker, still moving carefully, still wearing the slight caution of a man reminding himself not to trust his leg completely yet. Standing 10 feet away, with an expression that was harder to read than Hale's had been. Less layered, more raw. "I heard you told Kess I could come through the block," Riker said. "That's right. When I'm cleared." "When you're cleared," Ethan confirmed. Riker stood there. He was working through something, and it wasn't going smoothly, and he knew Ethan could see it. And the awareness that he could see it seemed to be part of what made it harder. He was a man who'd spent his career being physically formidable and emotionally private, and both of those things were less available to him now than they'd been before. "I want to say something," Riker said. Ethan waited. Riker took a breath that was shorter than he intended it to be. "What happened in the arena?" "Hale said to do it for real. I went along with it." He paused. "I knew it was wrong when I was doing it. I knew it before I was doing it. I did it anyway." "Why?" Ethan asked. Not challenging, just asking. Riker's jaw moved. "Because it was easier to go with Hale than to be the one who said, 'Stop.'" He looked at Ethan steadily, which was clearly costing him. "That's not an excuse. I know it's not an excuse. I'm just telling you what's true." Ethan held his gaze. He thought about the specific courage it took for a man like Brandon Riker to say that sentence out loud to the man he'd said it to. He didn't underestimate it. "I know," Ethan said. "Does that—" Riker stopped, started differently. Is there something between us I need to address directly?" "Not from my side," Ethan said. "Your ribs." "Healed." "Cole." Riker's voice had something rough in it that wasn't quite emotion and wasn't quite restraint. Somewhere in between, in the place where men who aren't practiced at certain things try to say them anyway. "I'm sorry. That's what I came out here to say. I'm sorry for what I did. It was wrong, and it was beneath this installation, and it was beneath me." The parking area was quiet. Somewhere nearby, a seagull was making its feelings known about something. Ethan looked at Riker for a long moment. "Accepted," he said. Riker let out a breath that had been held for a while. His posture changed, not dramatically, but measurably, like a man setting something down after carrying it for longer than was comfortable. "When I'm cleared," Riker said. "Monday or whenever your PT says you're ready," Ethan said. "Same offer I made Hale. Full curriculum, no modifications." "He told me it was hard." "It is," Ethan said. "He said it was worth it." "That too," Riker nodded. He turned to go, then stopped. He stood with his back partially to Ethan, looking at the middle distance. Then, "You're a different kind of man than I thought you were." "Most people are different kinds of men than other people think they are," Ethan said. Riker turned slightly, looked at him over his shoulder. "Yeah," he said. "I'm learning that." Then he left. Ethan stood in the parking area for a moment. The California afternoon was doing what it did, the light getting long and golden, the salt air coming in off the water, the bass humming with its own particular frequency around him. He thought about the arena and the corridor and the briefing room and the training space. He thought about the distance between where he'd been and where he was standing right now, and the chain of things that had connected those 2 points, and how none of them had been easy, and most of them had been worth it. He got in his car. He called Lily's after-school program on the way out of the lot. She picked up before the program coordinator could. "Dad," she said immediately. "Dad, something happened." He heard it in her voice. Not distress, something else. The high-frequency brightness of a child who has something to report. "Tell me." "Mrs. Hartley said she's nominating me for the district spelling competition," Lily said. And the words came out slightly tangled together, the way her words did when she was excited. It's in April, at the high school. There's like 50 kids from all the different schools.
Lily.
I know.
That's incredible, he said. He didn't say, I'm proud of you, because he learned that wasn't what she needed to hear when something good happened. What she needed was to know he understood what it meant. You worked hard for that.
I've been practicing every night, she said. You didn't know because I do it after you say lights out, with a flashlight.
I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that.
It's for spelling, Dad.
That's educational. It's also 10:30 at night. Educational doesn't have a bedtime. He turned onto the coast road. The water was visible through the gap in the buildings, flat and silver in the evening light. We'll talk about the flashlight situation, he said, but the competition, I'll be there, front row. She was quiet for a second, in the way she was quiet when something had landed exactly right.
Okay, she said.
Then, how was your day? He thought about Hale on day one, hands on the mannequin, feeling the threshold for the first time. He thought about Garrett staying on the casualty through the full scenario. He thought about Riker in the parking lot, setting something down. He thought about Kess saying, I underestimated you, with the plainness of a man who'd earned the right to say true things. It was a good day, he said.
Yeah?
Yeah, he paused. The kind where you can tell you're building something real.
Like my spelling practice, she said.
He smiled. He didn't say anything for a moment. Exactly like your spelling practice, he said. The 30-day post-block evaluations came back in the second week of April. Pruitt brought the results to Ethan's office on a Wednesday morning and set the report on the desk and stood back with his arms crossed and the expression of a man who had been waiting to feel something and was now feeling it. The numbers were significant, not marginally better than baseline, significantly better. Response accuracy under escalating threat conditions, casualty outcome scores, decision latency in the critical interval between threat identification and response initiation. All of them moved in the right direction by margins that would hold up to scrutiny from anyone who looked at the methodology. Admiral Reese has seen these, Pruitt said. I figured you'd show him, Ethan said. He wants to talk about expanding the program beyond this installation. Pruitt paused to let that land. He's in conversation with NSW Group 1 about a potential intercommand rollout. Your curriculum, your training methodology. Ethan looked at the report. He thought about the blank template from the first morning in the office. He thought about the 6 a.m. kitchen table sessions with his coffee and his laptop, and the quiet house around him, working backward from the failure mode, building each layer so it would hold the weight of what came next. That's a significant undertaking, he said. It is, Pruitt said. It would require you to train a cadre of instructors who could deliver the curriculum across multiple commands. You'd be building a pipeline, not just running a block. How long a timeline? Reese wants a proposal in 60 days. Ethan was quiet for a moment. He looked at Lily's drawing on the wall, the rectangle man with the yellow star. He thought about a Thursday morning at a gate, a man checking IDs, a gray badge, 3 years of invisible. He thought about a boot connecting with his ribs, and the 4 seconds after it, and 322 men who stopped looking past him and started looking at him. I'll have a proposal in 30, he said. Pruitt looked at him. I said 60. 30, Ethan said. The timeline is right. Pruitt was quiet for a moment. Then he uncrossed his arms and did the thing with his mouth that meant something was being suppressed. 30, he said. All right. He picked up the report and left. Ethan opened his laptop. He opened a new document. He sat with it for a moment. The blank space of something new, the particular weight of a beginning. He thought about everything that was behind him,
everything it had taken to get here. The cost and the distance and the long gray years and the Thursday morning when everything had broken open. He thought about Lily saying perseverance in a school gymnasium while a boy named Trevor held his breath. Perseverance, not giving up. He started typing. The proposal took him 26 days. He turned it in on a Thursday morning, exactly the same day of the week as the training block that had started all of it. A coincidence he noticed and said nothing about. He left the document on Pruitt's desk before 7 a.m. and went to his office and drank his coffee and waited. Pruitt called him at 9:15. "You turned in a 26-page proposal with appendices," Pruitt said. "The appendices are important," Ethan said. "The appendices are longer than the proposal." "That's because the data is in the appendices." A pause. "Cole, I told you 30 days. "You said 30 was all right," Ethan said. "You didn't say it was the minimum." Another pause. Longer. Then Pruitt said, "Admiral Reese wants to meet tomorrow morning. 0800. Bring the appendices." "I'll bring 2 copies," Ethan said. He heard Pruitt do the thing with his mouth. "Bring 3, Pruitt said, and hung up. The meeting the next morning had more people in it than the last one. Reese was there, and Pruitt, and Vasquez again, and 2 men Ethan didn't recognize, who were introduced as representatives from NSW Group 1. They were the kind of men who occupied rooms without advertising it. Quiet authority, careful eyes, the specific posture of people who made decisions that affected a lot of other people and had made peace with the weight of that. Ethan sat down and put his copies of the proposal on the table and waited. Reese opened without preamble, the way Ethan had come to understand he always did. "The post-block evaluation data is compelling. I've had 2 independent analysts review the methodology, and both confirmed it holds. The curriculum works." He looked at Ethan. "The question on the table today is scope." "The proposal addresses scope in Section 4, Ethan said. "I've read Section 4, Reese said. "I want to hear you say it." Ethan looked around the table. The curriculum needs to live in the training pipeline permanently, not as a standalone block. It needs to be integrated into the existing combatives and medical certification tracks, so operators are building the parallel processing framework from the beginning of their training, not encountering it as a supplement later. He paused. That means training instructors who understand the material deeply enough to deliver it correctly. Not just the techniques, the reasoning underneath the techniques. The curriculum fails if the instructors treat it as a combatives block with medical add-ons. It has to be taught as what it is. "Which is?" one of the NSW Group 1 representatives asked. "Decision architecture under maximum stress," Ethan said. "Teaching a man what to hold on to when everything is trying to make him let go." The room was quiet for a moment. Reese looked at the representative, then back at Ethan. "The instructor pipeline. You're proposing to build it yourself. I'm proposing to oversee its construction," Ethan said. "I can't be in 12 places at once. I can build a cadre of 8 to 10 instructors who can carry the curriculum correctly across multiple commands, and I can quality control the delivery through a certification process." He opened the proposal to the appendix. The certification criteria are in Appendix 3. The other NSW representative leaned forward and looked at the page. He read for a moment. Then he said, without looking up, "This certification is harder than most of our current instructor qualification standards." "Yes," Ethan said. "Deliberately?" "The curriculum is harder than most of what it's being added to," Ethan said. "The certification needs to match the material. If the instructors haven't been pushed to the threshold themselves, really pushed, not walked through a controlled demonstration, they can't teach other people to find it." The representative looked up. He had a measured expression that was not hostile and not effusive. The expression of a man doing serious arithmetic. You're saying every instructor who delivers this curriculum has to go through the full block as a trainee first? Yes. Including senior operators. Especially senior operators, Ethan said. Because senior operators are the most likely to believe they already know what the threshold feels like. Some of them do. Some of them have a story about what it felt like that they've been telling themselves for years that isn't entirely accurate anymore. He paused. The block tells them the truth. It can't do that if they skip it. The room was quiet again. Then Reese said, "Approved in principle. I want a formal implementation plan by the end of the month." He looked at Ethan with the direct, unapologetic assessment that Ethan had come to understand was simply how Reese saw things. You'll have the resources. You'll have the access. What you won't have is a lot of patience from this command if the results don't hold at scale. They'll hold, Ethan said. You're confident about that. The curriculum is sound, Ethan said. I built it from the inside of the problem, not from the outside looking in. Reese held his gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once, with the particular quality of finality that ended meetings. Good, he said. We're done here, he told Lily that evening over dinner. Not the full version. She was 8, and the full version involved organizational structures and implementation timelines that would have genuinely bored her. But the shape of it. They're going to use my curriculum at other bases, he said. Not just here. Lily stopped eating. She looked at him with the full searchlight attention. Like a lot of other bases? Potentially. How many people? A few hundred in the first year. More after that, if it goes the way it's supposed to go. Lily considered this in the serious way she considered things that were bigger than her immediate world. So, you're teaching people how to not give up when it's hard? Ethan looked at her. That's a pretty accurate description. That's what perseverance is, she said. Yeah, he said. It is. She went back to eating. Then she said, casually, with the tone of someone making a small observation. I always knew you were good at important stuff. He looked at her. The lopsided smile, the missing tooth, the steady, unsentimental eyes that had always seen more than he expected them to. How'd you know that? He said. She shrugged. You pack good lunches, she said. People who care about the details are usually good at the important stuff. He didn't say anything for a moment. Turkey and Swiss, he said. Apple slices, she said, not the whole apple. Because you never eat the whole apple. Because I never eat the whole apple, she confirmed. He looked at his daughter across the dinner table and felt the particular fullness in his chest that had been growing for months now. Not swelling, not dramatic, just the steady, quiet presence of a life that had found the shape it was supposed to have. The district spelling competition was on a Saturday in the 3rd week of April. Ethan was in the front row, as promised. He'd arrived 30 minutes early. Old habit. He showed up early to everything. And he'd sat in the folding chair in the high school gymnasium and watched the other parents filter in and watched the kids arrange themselves on the stage with a particular combination of confidence and terror that competitions produce in children who care about winning, which was every child who had ever walked onto a stage. Lily found him in the crowd from the stage and gave him a look that meant she had registered his presence and filed it under expected and was now focusing on the actual event. That was fine. That was correct. He didn't need acknowledgement. He just needed to be there. He needed to be there. Kess slid into the chair beside him 4 minutes before the competition started. Ethan glanced at him. How did you know about this? I know most things that happen, Kess said pleasantly. He had a cup of coffee from somewhere, and the relaxed posture of a man who had decided he was welcome without being told, which was exactly how he operated everywhere. "Does your family know you're here?" "My wife said it was a good use of a Saturday morning, and also that she would like to meet your daughter at some point." Kess looked at the stage. "Which one?" "Third from the left," Ethan said. Kess found her. He watched her for a moment. The upright posture, the still hands, the level gaze that was reading the room without being read by it. "She looks like someone," he said. "Yeah," Ethan said, "like someone who shows up early and waits." Ethan almost smiled. The competition ran 90 minutes, and Lily made it to the final 4 before a boy from another school got the word conscientious right on his second attempt, and knocked her out on pharmaceutical, which she spelled with 2 A's in the wrong places, and received with the tight-jawed acceptance of a child who understood the result and did not fully accept it. She came off the stage and found him and walked up to him with her chin level, which told him everything about what kind of moment this was. "Pharmaceutical," she said. "Tough word," he said. "I knew it this morning," she crossed her arms. "I knew it this morning, and then on stage I second-guessed myself, and I put the second A in the wrong place." "What made you second-guess?" She thought about it honestly, which was something she always did. She didn't perform feeling. She actually worked through it. "Because when it mattered the most, I stopped trusting what I already knew," she said. "I started thinking about whether I was right, instead of just being right." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "That's the hardest thing," he said. "Trusting what you know when the pressure makes you doubt it." "I need to practice that," she said. "You will," he said. "That's what next year's competition is for." She uncrossed her arms. She looked up at him with a direct, clear assessment that he'd spent 8 years learning was the most honest thing she had. "Are you disappointed?" "In what?" "In me. For losing." "No," he said. "You made the Final 4 in a 50-kid district competition with 1 month of prep. You lost on a word that would stump most adults under pressure." He held her gaze. "I'm watching you become someone who handles hard things well, Lily. That's not disappointing. That's the whole point." She absorbed this. Then she said, "Kess came." "I know." "That was nice of him." "He said his wife wants to meet you." Lily looked in Kess's direction. He gave her a brief nod with the seriousness of a man at a formal ceremony, which made her almost laugh. "He's funny," she said, apparently surprised. "He'd be offended if he heard that," Ethan said. "He'd know it was a compliment," she said. She took his hand, the automatic, unself-conscious way children take the hands of people they trust completely, and they walked toward Kess together through the gymnasium, through the noise and the folding chairs and the parents collecting their children. And Ethan thought about all the mornings at the kitchen table with the laptop and the coffee and the quiet house, and all the early shifts at the gate, and all the distance between the man who'd checked IDs in a gray uniform and the man who was walking through a school gymnasium on a Saturday morning with his daughter's hand in his. The distance was real. He didn't minimize it. But he hadn't traveled it alone. He'd traveled it with a kid who packed her own lunch when he forgot, who practiced spelling by flashlight after lights out, who looked at him across dinner tables and waiting lines and quiet evenings and simply, steadily, believed that he was supposed to be doing something that mattered. That belief had been the thing underneath everything else, the foundation that held the weight of all the other layers. In May, Marcus Hale completed the full curriculum. He came to Ethan's office afterward, still in his training clothes, and stood in the doorway the same way he'd stood in it the first time.
but the discomfort was gone. He stood in it like a man who'd earned the right to be there, which was different. "Certification assessment?" Ethan said. "Pass," Hale said. He said it without performance, just the fact. "Pruitt ran it. I scored in the top 8% of all block completers." "I know," Ethan said. "I looked at the sheet." Hale came in and sat in the extra chair, Kess's chair, informally, though Kess would not have appreciated that characterization. He sat with his forearms on his knees and his hands loose, and looked at Ethan the way men look at each other when something has been completed that needed completing. "I want to be considered for the instructor cadre," Hale said. Ethan had expected this. He'd been thinking about it for 2 weeks. "It's a significant commitment," he said. 3 command rotation over the first year. You'd be traveling." "I know." "It means you're delivering my curriculum," Ethan said. "My methodology, my standards, not your interpretation of them." "I understand that." "Do you?" Ethan looked at him steadily. "Because you came into that arena wanting to prove something. I need to know that's finished." Hale held his gaze. The complicated texture that had been in his expression since the corridor was gone. What had replaced it was simpler and more durable. The settled quality of a man who had worked through something all the way to the other side. "It's finished," Hale said. "What I was trying to prove that day wasn't real. The credential that mattered, the real one, I had to earn from you." He paused. "I know what that cost you." 2 cracked ribs," Ethan said. 2 cracked ribs," Hale said. "And 3 years of a gate and a badge, and nobody seeing what was actually standing there." He said it plainly, without drama. "I added to that. I'm aware of it." Ethan was quiet for a moment. He looked at the wall, at Lily's drawing, the rectangle man with the yellow star. "You're approved for the cadre," he said. Hale nodded. He stood. He extended his hand, not the automatic gesture of a formal environment, but the deliberate one of a man making a specific statement about where things stood. Ethan shook it. "Monday," Ethan said. "First instructor orientation, 0700. "I'll be there at 6:58, Hale said. Ethan almost smiled. "I know you will," he said. Brandon Riker completed the curriculum in the last week of May. He didn't come to Ethan's office afterward. He didn't need to. The conversation in the parking lot had been the conversation, and they both knew it. But he stopped Ethan on the east walkway the following morning. A brief stop, 2 men between destinations. "Good curriculum," Riker said. "Thank you." "I mean that as fully as it sounds," Riker said. "Not politely. Fully." "I know," Ethan said. "I can tell the difference." Riker nodded once. Then, "Hale's on the instructor cadre." "He is." "Is there room for another one?" Ethan looked at him. He took the measure of the man in front of him, the same way he'd taken it in the bleachers a lifetime ago, fast and complete, but arriving at a completely different answer. "There's room," Ethan said. Riker's posture changed in the small way that meant something had settled. "I'll put in the application." "Do that," Ethan said. They went their separate ways on the walkway, and the morning was already warm, the California spring doing what it did, and Ethan walked toward his office thinking about the instructor cadre and the implementation timeline and the 30-day proposal that had taken 26 days, and all the things still ahead of him, all the building still left to do, which was a lot, and which was exactly as it should be. A man without building left to do was a man who'd stopped somewhere he wasn't supposed to stop. Ethan Cole was not going to stop. On the last Friday in May, he picked Lily up from school, and they went to the beach. Not for any particular reason. It was a good afternoon, and she'd asked, and he'd said yes, which was the whole logic of it. They sat on the sand above the tide line,
and Lily built something architectural with wet sand that she described as a castle, but that Ethan's professional assessment would have categorized as an extremely ambitious structure with significant engineering challenges. And he sat beside her and watched the water and didn't think about anything in particular for a while. That was rare. That was something he'd had to relearn. How to just be somewhere, fully, without the part of his brain that was always keeping 40% of itself somewhere else, running its calculations. He was getting better at it. "Dad?" Lily said. She was adding a tower to the structure. "Yeah.
Do you think I'll win the spelling competition next year?" "I think you'll be better prepared next year than you were this year," he said. "Whether you win depends on who else shows up."
That's a very cautious answer.
It's an honest one. She considered this. She added another tier to the tower, which was now architecturally overcommitted.
"I'm going to practice pharmaceutical every day until April."
That's a long time to practice one word.
"It's not about the word," she said, with the patience of someone explaining something obvious. "It's about not second-guessing myself when it matters."
He looked at her. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked. She gave him the look, the patient, slightly amused look that meant she found his question mildly ridiculous.
"From you," she said. "Where else?"
The tower fell.
She regarded the wreckage with equanimity, the way she regarded most things that didn't go as planned, which was with the immediate assessment of what was salvageable and the unspoken intention to try again. She started rebuilding. Ethan watched the water. He thought about a Thursday morning at a gate, checking IDs, invisible in a gray uniform. He thought about a warrant officer walking toward him with a folded piece of paper. He thought about the arena and the mat and the 4 seconds that had changed everything, and the months that had followed, and the man he'd become during them, or, more accurately, the man he'd always been, finally standing in a place where the shape of him was visible. He thought about cracked ribs and blank curriculum templates, and a district spelling competition, and a parking lot apology, and a handshake in a small office with a crayon drawing on the wall. He thought about all of it, and then he stopped thinking about it, because Lily was handing him a piece of wet sand and asking him to hold it while she rebuilt the tower, and there was nowhere else in the world he needed to be. This was it. This was the whole thing. A man who'd been invisible had walked into a room and shown 322 people exactly who he was. He hadn't sought the moment. It had come for him, and he'd met it the only way he knew how, with everything he had, without apology, without performance, without anything to prove except the work. The work was real. The work had always been real. And Ethan Cole, security guard, single father, combat medic, Silver Star recipient, the man nobody in that arena had seen coming, had simply done what he had always done, in every field and every room and every moment that had asked something of him. He had stayed on the casualty. He had finished the job. He had not let go.